Great. Well, thanks for having me back. How many were here last year? Okay, good, because we're going to do a little continuity. We'll do a little review for people who aren't. Yes, so I have a monoclonal antibody for prostate cancer approved from a little company, a drug for bladder cancer, another little company I ran, and then a PMA device for melanoma detection for another company. So I've in a small company setting, have dealt with all three centers of the FDA. And in this book, I gave Joe 5 copies here. Hopefully, at least 5 of you will definitely want one. I have 2 chapters in here called I Don't Want to Fight Anymore. The first chapter and the last, because the fight nearly killed me. I had lost 29 pounds without trying. I remember I graduated high school at 173 pounds. I hit 169 in the middle of this ordeal. I've gained my weight back. I had alopecia areata, which is baldness in the beard. I was getting 2 hours of sleep a night. I mean, it was just, well, you have the weight of the world on you as a single product public company. Before that, I was taking a company public where we did the IPO roadshow in Europe. This is the bladder cancer drug. And we were going to do the panel meeting because it was supposed to be a grand slam, slam dunk, because we were in lockstep with the FDA. And then we were going to continue the US IPO. And the panel voted 11-0 against. Okay, so I've had 2 tremendously public, depressing episodes at the FDA. So I decided after the Mela episode, that's it, I'm done. I'm not doing this again. I'm not doing this again until the rules change, because the rules, you know, I'm not as smart as I look, perhaps. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Right? Well, it took 3 times for me to learn my lesson. So what I did was I wrote this book, and I started what's called the Institute, the Initiative for Patient-Centered Innovation, which is me and a keyboard. And I just write a lot about policy and policy changes for FDA. I wrote this white paper last year, which I'll get into a little bit here, the proper role for the FDA in the 21st century. And, you know, I intended to change the system, but I had no idea what might happen. And what might happen was people actually listened. And I was on the short list for FDA commissioner consideration. And I'm still in the anger phase of grief. And what I'm angry about is that there's a real chance to change things. And I think we're not going to change things as much as I'd like them changed. We're going to get to that right now. So that's me. Just keep going. I was called the Antonin Scalia. Sorry, Gunther. I was called the Antonin Scalia of the life sciences, and that's because I actually believe we got to get back to the law. And the law, Joe asked me to give this talk, the law is safety and effectiveness, right? That's the law. And if you look at the law, the first 3 lines of the law say the FDA's job, the mission of the FDA is to promote public health, notice the word promote, by promptly, efficiently reviewing clinical research and taking appropriate action on the marketing of regulated products in a timely manner. First 3 things I want to say. The first 3 lines of the law have 3, it's like, we want it fast. We want it promptly, efficiently, in case you weren't listening, in a timely manner, right? We want it fast. Okay. The other thing in the law, we want promote. And how do we promote that? Well, can you hit the thing? We make sure of safety and effectiveness, okay? We make sure veterinary drugs are safe and effective too, and reasonable assurance of safety effects for devices. The device standard is actually lower, if you will, than the drugs and biologic standard, all right? Now, good going. If you go on the FDA website, this is what the FDA says their job is to do. We're responsible for protecting the public health. That is completely different. Promote and protect are 2 different things. But they're going to do all this stuff, that's fine. But look at here, too. Promoting, no. And then we're going to advance health that make medicines more effective. Read it. I'm not a liar. Safer. More affordable. That's not in the mission of the FDA. So that's why I'm called, you know, get back to safety and effectiveness. Only do safety and effectiveness. The market that Gunther talked about, let the market decide among the safe and effective products, which are the most clinically useful, right? So that's what I talk about. Again, yeah. So what's happened over the years, and I'm a great defender of the FDA because, you know, if I do a bad job, board fires me, right? If I do a good job, they give me a bonus. At the FDA, whether you do a good job or a bad job, you get yelled at. And that's not fair. You look at the drug Avandia. Avandia is a great drug. And there was an interim analysis, I'm not going to use names, performed by someone who said, oh, this increases bad outcomes, cardiovascular bad outcomes. And so black box warning, I think they took the drug off the market for a while. The company had to do all these studies. 4 years later, oops, we were wrong. Oops, we were wrong. Guess what happened in that oops, we were wrong? Every diabetes drug since then has to have cardiovascular outcome studies. You know what that takes? The last drug that got approved, I'll show you later, you know, it's 6,000 patient, 4-year trial to prove we don't hurt cardiovascular outcomes. Meanwhile, we want to reduce the blood sugar, okay? But because of that, and what happened was, oops, we were wrong, but they didn't then change the guidelines. They didn't change the practical guidelines. They kept that hurdle up there. So what happens is they're afraid. Can you go back? So no, I'll get there. So the reason is they're afraid. And you know, if the highest aim of a captain were to preserve his ship, he'd never take it for port, right? And that's what we have here. All right, so this is the probability of success from phase 1 through, this is for drugs and biologics, and overall it's about a 10%. Go ahead. Okay, but for rare diseases, it's 25%. And what's happening, I talked last year about 21st century cures. I can't believe it did get passed. I just simply cannot believe that. And the biggest thing for devices in 21st century cures, they want to create this breakthrough therapy pathway. And what I fear is going to happen to devices is just what the horrible things that have happened with drugs and biologics are about to describe. So there you go. So if you look overall, the success rate for rare disease, and rare isn't as rare as you think. Rare is taking lung cancer and finding one mutation in it, okay? And then that brings that population lower than 200,000 patients, and all of a sudden it's a rare drug. It's lung cancer, for crying out loud. I can make any disease rare, any one of them, right? With genomics, easily. Okay, anyway, so, and the way that happened was we complained. The industry complained, patients complained. So the FDA put a series of programs in to make drugs approved faster. If you just read these to yourself, you will see that they all sound exactly the same. So the law before 88 wasn't working, so they passed fast track, must be intended for serious condition, significant unmet medical need. That didn't work so well. Now we go accelerated approval, same thing, serious condition. That didn't work so well, priority review. That didn't work so well, and breakthrough therapy. That galled me, breakthrough therapy. I'll get into why. But, so what's happened over the years as these have come out? Keep going. Yeah, keep going. Okay, so here we go. Let's look at the approvals from last year. So last year, 22 new drugs were approved. That's horrible. That is absolutely horrible. I don't know if any of you remember the articles at the time. The articles at the time were making excuses. Why? Oh, because a few were approved earlier, the prior year. Okay, 4, 5. Okay, thank you. Bring it up to 27. It's paltry. It's horrible. And a ridiculous number of them, hit the button, please. 73%, not all the way, 73% of them qualified for one of those 4 programs or orphan drug. We are developing drugs for niche uses, and that's it. Okay, let's keep going. So, not yet. This is a quote. This is a quote from one of the high rankings at Cedars. FDA approved 22 novel drugs, most of which have the potential to add significant clinical value to the care of thousands of patients. Thousands? We got millions with heart failure, with diabetes, with obesity, with Alzheimer's. So the FDA is loving that they are passing drugs for thousands. Why? Because we're afraid. We're afraid. So if we approve niche drugs, God forbid, every one of them who takes them dies. In some niche diseases, it's 17 people east of the Mississippi. They like those drugs. And it's going to happen with devices. So last year, 0 drugs approved for cardiovascular disease. 0. 1 approved for diabetes. I'll tell you about that in a second. 0 for obesity. 0 for Alzheimer's. Go back. 0 for Alzheimer's. We're not going to move the needle in solving the most vexing problems if this continues. Okay, next. And this is why I just think all those programs are a complete fraud. Frankly, a fraud. You never see a drug get approved with just satisfying, 1 program, right? So they're all repetitious. They're all PR. They're all, look, we're trying, we're listening to you. The elected officials, rather than getting to the fundamental problems, which I'm going to talk to you about in a little while on the device side especially, rather than getting to the fundamental problem, let's pass more law. Why? I wrote about this. Oversight. What's easier oversight? What's easier to do? Oversight or pass new law? Oversight is really hard to do, right? There's no glory in oversight. Most oversight yields nothing. Right? You got to do a lot of oversight to detect the problem. Passing a law, that's great. And I can say, I champion that, or I can talk about it. So that's why we have more and more law, but the law doesn't get to the fundamental problem. And we see the fundamental problem. So here you go. So this was the proposed 21st century cures. This was already in a guidance document initially in 2008. It's exactly the same language. Precisely the same language. Why did we need this 21st century cures craziness with a breakthrough program? Why? I have no idea. The other thing in 21st century cures I talked about last year was they had to put in there, because of all this new law we're passing, and FDA staff are not trained on it, they actually had to put in the 21st century cures a requirement that all FDA staff get trained on least burdensome approach. That is the core tenet of devices, least burdensome approach. We have so much law going on that staff aren't trained on it, so you had to put it in a new law. Oh, go train them on least burdensome approach. Let's keep going. It's ridiculous. So this is now, I took this from the law that was indeed passed. It's the same language. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so I absolutely believe this will do nothing. I think it's going to do, I think it'll do nothing. But if it does something, it's going to do what we've done to drugs. We're going to preferentially make devices, just as what's going on in drugs, for more and more niche claims. The reason I think it's going to do nothing is this. Let's look at the humanitarian device exemption. Anybody ever pass one of those? Anybody in here? Yeah. What was it on? Yeah, okay, great. Anybody else? Yeah, in the back? External defibrillator? Great. And is it still active? Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Guess how many... So the law was passed in... it started with 4,000. They're changing, or they have changed it to 8,000. It was passed in 1990. The first one was in 1997. I have no idea why there's a 7-year gap. It's for significant unmet medical needs. It's exactly what breakthrough is for. And the device will not expose the patient to unreasonable significant risk of illness or injury, and the probable benefit. So probable benefit. We don't need to exactly prove the benefit in that population. Just have probable benefit outweighs the risk. There's labeling requirements for it, and so this is a good surrogate for breakthrough. Okay, no later than, so you're supposed to get this approved in 75 days. Okay, right? So this is good. I like the law. This is a good law, right? So you have something out there that could help you call it 8,000 patients, and let's get it out there as fast as we can, as soon as we know it can be labeled for safe use, and there's some probability that it might work. Let's go to the next slide. So let's look at this. Since 1990, when the law was passed, there's only been 59. Why? Why? Well, one reason is, here are the three most recent ones. You can just read them while I'm talking to give you an idea what they do. But why? Let's go to the next slide. Why? Well, here's why. One reason is why the median review time for these is 671 days. So you would think, here we have on the device side something we've had on the drug side, the orphan drug, where you develop it for an orphan claim, you get it on the market, you're able to then raise more money, whatever, and then you develop it for additional claims. This would be a beautiful route to do that with. But not if it takes 675 days, right? You know, especially for device companies, that could be really good. You show investors that you got something through the FDA, that it's being used, even it's a small population, it's being used, it's being used by these hospitals so much. It could be really, really great. But this is just absurd. And you see very, very not used much. The FDA doesn't like these. Sponsors feel that dealing with the FDA on these is too rigorous. So what I would have done if I were Congress, I would have looked at why a program we already have in place for breakthrough things that could really help people, really move the needle, and allow us to ascertain information on the device before it going bigger. Why is that program not being used so much? Nope, let's just pass a new law, breakthrough therapy. I don't think the device side is capable of managing that program, and that's why I don't think it's going to do anything, and if it does, it's going to take it the way of drugs. Next slide. So let's take you through a quick case study. Zarical, anybody know this story? This is a drug-device combination. Oy, another thing. Any of you developing drug-device combinations? Yeah. And now you're in a state of flux, right? They haven't finalized them. Okay, so here's a company. They have a collagen mesh for surgical closure, surgical repair, and they infused it with bupivacaine, okay, a local anesthetic. And go ahead. They did studies. Go ahead, please. Okay, so they were developing 3 products based on this. Next. And 2 phase 3 studies showed the thing really, really worked well. Go to the next slide. Go to the next, I'm sorry. Yeah, so here you go. Met the endpoint. Met the endpoint, P.004, P less than 1. This is in pain intensity. It also met the endpoint in reducing opioid use. That was another endpoint. And another endpoint was, you'd think if you're using less opioids, you should have less opioid toxicity, like constipation and such. And another endpoint showed there was less opioid toxicity. So here you have reduced pain, reduced opioid use, you saw reduced opioid toxicity. You know this damn thing works. Okay, so what happens? Go ahead. The company, just keep going. You believe me, it works. Okay, so the company, go. Okay, so the company files the, this is good, files the application. They get a refuse to file. This is in December. Now, what have we been hearing about? What's the only thing that Joe Manchin talks about? Okay, opioid toxicity. What are you going to do about opioid? Okay, so here you have an application at the FDA. Well, what can the FDA really do about the opioid crisis? Not much, okay? This is something they could do. How about we get something approved that wouldn't require as much opioid use and people don't get hooked on the opioid product? What do? They file a refuse to file, give a refuse to file to this little company. Their stock went from $1.80 to 89 cents, okay? And what was it over? It was because they filed as a drug. They didn't file like a 510K, okay? They filed it as a drug. FDA wanted them to file it as a drug-device combination. You believe this? So they met with the company. I predicted this would resolve. The company met with them. The FDA wanted some tox study, whatever. And what happened? Go ahead. Keep going. And look what happens. The company gets acquired. All that value that investors brought into this company wiped away. This other company comes in buying at a 5x, 2x, 3x on the come, and now that company's gone. So innovation. The FDA continues to do things that just kill innovation. All right? Okay, next. So this was encouraging. Everybody see this? 23andMe got approval to not only provide testing on known genetic abnormalities, but also this health risk thing, okay? So they can give you the probability based on your whole genetic profile of certain diseases. That's health risks. Interesting. It's a tentative change of heart for the agency because 3.5 years ago, it sent a strongly worded letter reprimanding 23andMe CEO for marketing the same kind of test that just got approved. They felt that these genomic analyses require FDA-approved medical device and a physician to communicate the results. 3.5 years later, the company de novo pathway, so now it got a class 2, so all other additions to this will be 510K. But again, not seeing the benefits of an empowered patient. A patient who cares enough to have this done, to engage their healthcare provider in a discussion about it, do the research on their own, maybe modify their own health. Maybe that would be the weapon the family finally needed to get the mother or father to exercise, whatever. To deprive that. So at least I'm encouraged that 3.5 years later they approved it. Okay, next. So I was at the advisory committee meeting for bezlotuximab, which is a drug for C. difficile recurrence. And I couldn't believe it. In the intermission, the downtime, the FDA would show slides. And this is one of the slides they showed. FDA advisory committees, protecting the public health. So if you were an FDA advisor, okay, and you needed a cup of coffee or wanted to go to the bathroom in a break, and you came back and you saw that slide up there, and it was about time to vote, right? Right. What are you thinking? Don't do it. Exactly. Don't do it. So I couldn't believe this. And the reason I was there, I had a graduate student with me, and we were going to do a project I'm going to show you the data on right now. And I felt she should see an advisory committee. I've run 3 advisory committee meetings, and frankly, I get post-traumatic stress syndrome when I go back and watch them. So she picked this, and I looked at the pre-meeting booklet, and I said, this is going to be a boring one. This is a slam dunk. This drug reduces C. difficile recurrence 40%, 3 less hospital days. Let's pick one where there'll be a controversy. I want to go to that one. No, but she wanted to go to one as quickly as possible. Fine, so we'll go. I couldn't believe the controversies here. This was Merck. Merck knows how to do studies. The data were incredible. And I'll never forget, the chair of the AdCom, guy from Harvard, sounded smart. He was asked, the question was not the way questions are supposed to be asked, which is, do you recommend approval for X drug for Y disease? The question was, all this gobbledygook, do you believe on the basis of the data, blah, 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 there's substantial evidence of effectiveness? If you go into the law, substantial evidence means the quality of the studies done. And to be a substantial evidence, you need randomized trials, you can have historical control, you can have all sorts of studies. They list like 5 types of trial. So substantial evidence is a regulatory issue, not a clinical issue. So the chair, who's having an FDA person whisper in his ear the whole time, he gets to vote, and he says, well, the question reads, is there substantial evidence of effectiveness here? Well, I think there's preponderance of evidence of effectiveness, but not substantial evidence. I vote no. This is the chair. This is the chair. Two votes later, 2 people later, this gentleman says, well, no surprise, Dr. Williams actually trained me, and I feel exactly the way he feels. You hear about conflict of interest all the time with panel members, right? The conflicts, were they paid by the company? Did they do trials? What about that conflict? Picking a derivative of someone. So anyway, the drug won the recommendation, and it did get approved, but as I said, I was sitting there thinking, I can't believe this even is a controversy, and it was. Next slide. So go back. So I took, I had a graduate student named Asma Gamey went back and looked at all the advisory committee meetings. We did it for devices too, but I'll tell you what happened. In this decade, so since 2010. In device world, how many of you were in 2010. You were active in this, right? Did anybody remember what happened in 2010 to advisory committee panels? Anybody? Do you know? Okay. Anybody remember? They changed the voting scheme. They changed the voting scheme from the panel voting on approval, we vote that this should be approved, approvable with conditions, and then the panel would debate the conditions. You're nodding your head. You remember this, okay? And not approved, right? So they changed it to, oh, no. In order to clarify, the wording was just absurd about why they changed it. It's like, we know we should be getting there. The regulations say the FDA is supposed to ascertain recommendations regarding approval. So they do this. We feel that the panel's recommendation didn't often correlate to approval, therefore we're going to change it to, do you think there's substantial evidence of safety, effectiveness, and benefit risk? How is that more clear than asking them about approval? So devices was easy to do. There was just a stark change. But on the drug side, the regulations even say that the wording should not have triple negatives, should be clear, should not, it's all these things are in the guidance. So we looked at the voting, and we see that only the cardiovascular and renal drug, there were 144 AdComs that qualified. We wanted new chemical entities. Only the cardiovascular and renal division, whenever they ask a question, they ask, do you recommend the approval of this drug, drug X, for use Y? Okay, that's the way it should be asked. And only about a third of the time are AdComs asked that way. The most egregious offender of this, of course, was the muscular dystrophy drug, which I can talk about later. But okay, so what about an indirect question? What if somewhere in the wording the word approval appeared, even though it wasn't a direct question? Go to the next slide. Turns out that still, so cardiovascular, still the percent of AdComs at which no approval recommendation, indirect or direct, still a third of them don't ask the approval question. And that is breaking the law. The law says the FDA needs to ascertain recommendations regarding approval. Okay, next slide. So another thing that we see in discussion about FDA is the use of biomarkers. So use of biomarkers, which I want, of course, as the basis of approval. And the FDA has said, oh, no, they've written guidance documents on biomarkers, and the issue is that they want to make sure the biomarkers are validated. Okay. I'm going to ask you folks, is there any more validated biomarker we have than glucose, right, which we talked about earlier, or LDL cholesterol lowering? No. The number of studies that have shown you lower cholesterol, you improve survival is astronomical. On the glucose side, I left something out of my, I want to mention. If you look at that one diabetes drug that was approved last year, 11,000 patients, 11 randomized studies. One of the randomized studies was a 6,000 patient 5-year trial. You look at one of the cancer drugs that was approved, and we won't take a small biotech company, let's pick Genentech. They know what they're doing. One non-randomized study, 200 patients. Okay, so let's talk about FDA biomarker effort. So here you have, can you go back? So here you have, go ahead, next one. So here you have Amgen's Repatha, and this got approved last year. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. And this was its claim. It got a very narrow label, even though the drug with one injection, okay, shows you can reduce cholesterol 60, 70%. It got familial FH, heterozygous, homozygous, the whole bit. And the only way it was able to get the general claim is because they got a conditional approval, basically. The only way they could get the general claim was to do a 27,000 patient outcomes trial. After all we know about lowering cholesterol, they had to do 27,000 patients to prove yet again, that lowering cholesterol leads to improved cardiovascular outcomes. So my prediction, we will never see drugs approved based on biomarkers, because if the FDA does not consider LDL lowering and glucose lowering as validated endpoints, there'll never be an endpoint they'll consider validated. And that's disheartening to me. Next. Okay, so let's look at this Entresto drug. This is a good drug for heart failure. Again, needed a huge trial to prove, why can't a heart failure approval just be based on, increased ejection fraction? Every cardiologist knows if I can get the ejection fraction from 40 to 55, that's going to be a good thing. Why do we need these long-term outcomes? How about a stress test? The patient before could only do this much on the stress test. After, 2 weeks or a month of the drug, they can do this. Why aren't they approved on that? Why do we have to go and do these incredible long endpoint studies? I don't get it, especially with a disease like heart failure, where so many other things can modulate that outcome. All right, so this one worked and it got it. Next one though. So this is a drug, keep going. This is a great drug. It's a lot like Epogen, right? It's a natural, just leave it as that. It's a natural hormone secreted by our bodies, especially women during pregnancy, and it increases the compliance of the vessels, and it makes better hemodynamics. So they isolate that relaxin hormone, create a drug for it. Go ahead, keep hitting it. Oh, wait a minute, go back, please. I think you jumped too much. And that's just my fault. And what happened was, it showed in better breathing, it showed better biomarkers, but they had a cardiovascular outcome study ongoing while they were at the panel meeting. And the panel, FDA was maligning the study, that whatever they were maligning. So the panel said, we'll wait to see the cardiovascular outcome study. Guess what happened when the cardiovascular outcome study came? It wasn't positive, though there were still hemodynamic evidence of success. So what I get very upset about with this is, this would be the ideal kind of drug you'd want in combinations. But if we don't get the drugs approved, you can't give combinations. So if we keep these hurdles so high, same thing, especially drug-device combinations. How many of you, I asked you earlier about the drug device. What bothers me so much about drug-device combinations, if you want to use a drug that's already approved for something, and now you want to put it in this device for something else, if that drug doesn't have the claim, let's say that same exact claim you're going for, you have to redevelop that. You have to basically get that drug-device combination, the new claim. It's not that you can just utilize the drug in a different way. I think that's nuts. Okay, so next slide. Next slide. So we do have an incredibly increased number of regulations. This is before 21st Century Cures was passed. This is before the new PDUFA laws are going to be passed. And I do agree with lowering that. Keep going. Fear, keep going. Keep my eye. Yeah, so what I, basically, the reason I was, I think, on the radar for FDA consideration was this concept. That the FDA's job is to get safe and effective products, drugs and devices, biologics, on the market, and then the medical marketplace, early adopter physicians, of course, patients, payers, increasingly, phase 4 studies, just the general use, is how we get from 2,000 drugs in the pharmacopoeia to 200 drugs being used 95% of the time. That's how it works. And my observation and my experience in citing the kinds of stuff that I talked about today was that the FDA is no longer content being at the top of the funnel. They want to be at the bottom of the funnel, such that on approval, they want all of these outcome studies, all of these data that would prove this drug is what? Safer, or device, safer, more effective, the whole bit, all part of their mission. They can't fulfill the mission I showed you earlier by being up here. They fulfill that other mission by being down here, and that's the problem. So I propose the way to get FDA back to the future is what the presentation of is. Right? How do we get FDA back to safety and effectiveness? and I called for, go ahead, next slide. I called for approval based on biomarkers as a first level, and it'd be in the label that this drug, is safe based on this, and it modulates the biomarker here. Second level would be a drug or device. I have a scheme for all, and biologics, all three. Clinical signs and symptoms. Okay, this improves clinical signs and symptoms. 3 would be this modulates disease path. So like if you have ulcerative colitis and you have 100 bowel movements a day, it brings it to 8. Okay, and then finally survival, which is what FDA really wants. So that's what really got me known, and that's what people mostly discussing, a new paradigm for approvals based on the nature of the evidence that you have. And I'm still pushing that, and I'm hoping that would get the FDA back to safety and effectiveness. Another problem that we've seen as FDA gets frightened and you have debacles that are covered in the news and things like that, is you have what used to be a nice balance between pre-approval requirements and post-approval, post-market controls. This is really great on the device side. In fact, if you read the device regulations, it basically says, if it can be done later, let it be done later after approval. It's basically the reading of it, okay? Well, what happened with, hit the slide, with all these additional regulations and concomitant with this shift to niche uses of drugs and I'm predicting devices, pre-approval requirements have skyrocketed, so we've lost the balance. And it's not like post-marketing controls stayed the same. They increased as well. So you have the worst of both worlds. You have more pre-market requirements and more post-approval requirements. Go ahead, next. And this is just my paradigm. Let's go to the device one and leave it up there for the end. Okay, next one. And that's it, okay? So, any questions?
Karen Iden, do you think you might have some other position in the future with the FDA?
I would love to try to help. Let's put it that way. I'd love to try to be part of the solution. So we'll see. The Senate committee just voted that they move Scott Gottlieb to a full, confirmation. So I think after that happens, we'll see. We'll see if anything. But I'd love to try to help.
You are a thought leader in this space. I love having you here. Your content, what you're sharing. How can my community help follow you and perpetuate your message? How can we help make a difference?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think I have a big problem with pharma and AdvaMed, okay? And the problem is, and could you tell us, I'll go first or you go first?
You go first. You go first, Joe.
I'll go first? All right, so here's my problem. While all of this was happening, okay, no one stepped up and say, hey, what about safety and effectiveness? Mela, my company was ruined when we proved safety and effectiveness. We agreed with FDA, sensitivity and specificity to qualify for both. We submit the application and they said, well, where's the clinical utility? That's implicit in the safety and effectiveness. So where was AdvaMed through all that? That's been happening all over to all of you, right? All of you. What's the clinical utility? It holds the vessel open. What's the clinical utility? I mean, what do you mean that's the clinical utility? God made the vessel like this. It's now like this. We bring it to that. What's the clinical utility? So what have they done? What has pharma done, bio or AdvaMed done or that? Nothing. They've carved little niches rather than complain about, we got to get back to safety and effectiveness. So what I feel we can all do is we need to clamor for that rather than trying to carve out, break through this and break through that, and my disease is more important than your disease. We need to get back to the basic tenet of the law. Curious, tell us.
I mean, we're just noticing the concept of we're going to regulate ourselves has been taken to and squared. And so they're scared of shadows, and they've made everyone else scared of shadows, which we don't want people to be intemperate and risky, but AdvaMed and pharma now are basically making money, running conferences, teaching people how to navigate the briar patch that they've helped
create. Yes, they've not put any weed killer down, for sure.
Yeah,
exactly
so
right.
there's no efficiency or alignment. It's
Yes.
just another obstacle. And so
Yes.
in essence, I mean, I think it's creative policy making. that the policymakers have got another organization that's not an official policymaker that has actually taken what they've done and complicated it.
Yeah, and they
news.
basically are in lockstep. I'll just tell you, I hope you read my book. In the middle of all this, I said to my regulatory lawyer, I said, who's someone who consults with AdvaMed, I said, you've got to bring me to AdvaMed, you got to bring me to AdvaMed. And he said to me, Joseph, AdvaMed doesn't want to hear from you. They like what's happening to you. I didn't believe him. Yeah, because then they'll acquire you. You know, the bigger companies then acquire you. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But you know what? I believe it now. So I think we have to be more vocal about the intent of the law. We don't, let's not be viewed as renegades. You know, it's not like we want no law. We want safety and effectiveness, and we'll live by that. And that's what I think we need to do.
Who are other champions of this cause besides you?
You put me on the spot with that. Henry Miller. I revere Henry Miller. Henry Miller is at Stanford. He's at the Hoover Institute. And I just urge all of you to look him up. I think he's wonderful. Like, he's more eloquent than I am about it. And it's just very funny. One day my wife had read an article Henry wrote, and she thought I wrote it. And he and I never met, and now we have a relationship over the phone, and it's just incredible. So he'd be the one I believe most aligned with my point of view.
I've asked this question, I'm going to ask it a different way. You've
Sure.
told us we need to be vocal. We need to support this initiative. Besides us all going out and blogging and writing comments and social media and the like, is there something more concrete we can do? Is there a petition? Would that do anything?
The other issue is, you know, when I was in contention, I got calls from a bunch of little companies. This is funny. When I wrote Innovation Breakdown, I said to the publisher, my next book is going to be the following. People are going to read this and call me, you think that was bad, right? And I was going to get 25 cases, and then I'd pick the 8 worst, and I'd write the second book, a chapter on each one. That never happened until I was in the running for FDA commissioner. Then I did start getting calls. And I can't blame any of you if you're out there or if people out there. They're afraid. They're afraid. So I'll tell you this, if any of you are on boards, okay, or any of you are running the companies, I think we have to get past that fear. And I was, you know, I had the money to fight the FDA and I fought them. It almost ruined my marriage. It almost ruined my life. The company lost in the end anyway. That's not a ringing endorsement for get out there and fight, you freedom fighters. But if these stories aren't known, there's nothing can be done about it. One thing you can do, lobby. You know, lobbying has this horrible connotation. Lobbying's educating. Go to Washington, meet with your elected representatives, tell them what you're doing, tell them the problems you're having. They need to be educated about the problems.
Dr. Joseph Gulfo.
Thanks for having me.